Well guys, registration of bicycles is back on the table in the English government, and we know the arguments. We have the arguments on one side of the table which comes from drivers, and they say that bicycles use the road and they're not paying any license to help fund the roads, and if they do anything wrong, then there's no identification to identify them like there is a car. If a car is speeding or does something silly, someone can get the number plate and they can report them. And they're saying that bicycles do all these crazy things which are inappropriate, and we can't get the number plate and we can't report them. And they're also arguing that bicycles are dangerous on the road, and they're on the roads and they're not paying any money towards using the roads. And then on the other side of the fence, bicycles have the argument that, hey, you know, the law says we're allowed to be on the road. That's the way the law is currently. And you vehicles treat us with contempt, and you do turns in front of us. You come very close. And there's actually a product which is made by actually a West Australian company called Cyclic, and they have a camera you can fit to your bike called the Fly 6. And they have a account on Instagram, and they put up there all of these near misses that cars are doing to bicycles. So that's the two sides of the argument. So let's roll that intro and let's have a little bit of a look at the practicalities of putting registration plates on bicycles. Well, if you haven't heard, the minister, part of the English government, has been talking about bringing in registration for bicycles. Now, this is a fairly high level. A lot of people have put up a lot of resistance to it, but when you've got a minister talking about registration of bicycles, it's not just some group of people or association or whatever. This is kind of at the front door of it maybe becoming legislation, or the conversations being had in government, which are the people that make law, and then we have to abide by that law, and the police then go out there and make sure that the law is complied with. So this is a bit of a eyebrow raise in the cycling industry. So really, could this really be practical? Now, I don't have any problems with putting a registration plate on my bike. Now, some may say that it's a hindrance for aerodynamics. It could be dangerous. You could cut yourself on the number plate. It's a bit hard to fit to a bicycle. Maybe they could be smaller, whatever. Maybe they could make them out of something different than tin. I don't know. Let's just argue that they could make them safe. Now, I would be quite happy to have that on my bike. I ride along, and then I'm paying my dues. I'm paying dues for my road, and I can ride my bike on the road, and I've got every right to be there. And no one can say, hey, look, I'm not paying my dues, and I can ride in the middle of the lane because I'm paying my money just like everyone else. And as long as I abide by the law, everyone will be happy with that. Well, my question is, will they? Now, the premise that the drivers are making, or the car drivers are making, is that their behaviour will change towards cyclists if cyclists have a number plate on their bicycle or they're registered to use the road. So what they say that they're going to do is treat cyclists differently. Now, I actually will argue otherwise. And my argument is that behavior changes in human beings is really slow, and it's a cultural thing. And what we need to do is link the request for registration against what the drivers really, the outcome they really want. So they're driving along the road. They have a bicycle in front of them that's traveling at 25 or 30 kilometers an hour, and they try and squeeze past them in the lane because they want to go faster and they believe that they're in their way. And even then, sometimes they don't even want to change the lane, even though that lane's free. And they come quite close to you. And they're saying that, hey, you shouldn't be on the road. But let's just say that they had a registration plate on. So now everyone agrees, the motorists agree, that bicycle is allowed to be on the road. And is the behaviour of the driver going to change? Is he going to say, hey, look, that bicycle's I can see he's got a registration plate on. He's allowed to be on the road. I'm going to treat him differently. Well, I will say they won't, because when they come up that bicycle and they have to slow down behind that bicycle, they're still going to be irritated by the fact that the bicycle's going a lot slower, and they're still going to want to get past the bicycle as quickly as possible. So that irritation to them will still be the same. The stimulus for that is exactly the same. Whether it's got a number plate on it or not is not going to change their behavior or their response to that situation. And they're still going to want the bicycle off the road, whether they have a right to be there or not, whether they're registered and paying for the road or not, makes no difference to how they react to that stimulus. So unless their behavior has a radical change, we're still going to get cars cutting in front of the bicycle. We're going to get the close passes. We're still going to get all of the same stuff we have now. The drivers believe the road's for them, whether you're registered or not, and their behavior will not change. So that's my argument, because unless drivers can show that there's going to be a behavioural change from cyclists and drivers, then putting a plate on a bicycle doesn't change anything. The plate has no impetus to change people's behaviour. Now, the second issue with registration plates on bicycles is that there's a lot of bicycles. People have a lot of bicycles in their homes in general. I don't know what it's like in England, but in Australia, people have bicycles, and it's even been stated that there's more bicycles than there is people in Australia. So people have got a lot of bicycles, and there's all these kids' bicycles and adult bicycles, and people only take them when they go away on holidays, and they don't generally ride them, but there's a lot of bicycles. People buy bicycles for their kids for Christmas and so on. So the question then comes, how practical is it to put a registration plate on all these bicycles? Now, let's just say, yep, they bring this in and they say every bicycle has to have a plate on it. Now, the point is, who are you going to register the bicycle to? Like if it's a child's bicycle, are you going to register it to the child, or are you going to register it to the parent? Which parent are you going to register it to? Or are they going to be exempt because the person riding it is under a certain age or whatever? Are they still allowed to use the bicycle in certain environments and be limited from going on the road or whatever? How do you manage that criteria? And even then, according to the drivers, bicycles can't be reported and they misbehave, and that could even be children as well. So how then do you administer the registration when it comes to minors instead of adults? The next problem is with the registration is, let's just say it becomes a significant amount. It could be $50 or $100, because to run a registration system, even if you make it part of the Department of Transport, is still very expensive. You need to have papers, you need to make up plates, you need to issue the plates. There's a certain amount of administrative cost to do that. So it's not going to be $1 or $2 or $3 to register your bike. It's going to be something like $20, $25, $50 a year, maybe $100 a year. I don't know. Now, let's just say it's $50 a year, or they might say £50 in the UK. Well, a lot of people are going, hang on a sec, I don't ride my bike that often, and it's sitting in the shed. I don't want to pay £50 every year for a bike that I'm hardly riding. So what we're going to have is we're going to have this mass problem of bikes being dumped. And they already actually have this problem in the Netherlands, because they have a lot of bikes, and they have all of these bikes getting thrown into the canals, and it's actually a massive problem, and they have to go and get these bicycles out of the canals every so often because they build up. So we're going to have all of these bicycles that people aren't going to want anymore, because it's not just sitting in the shed anymore. It actually is costing them to have it sitting in the shed. So they want to get rid of it. So what we're going to do is then we're going to have less bicycles, and we're going to have less incentive for people to ride, because they won't have the bicycle in the shed, and they're not going to buy a new one because they have to pay the registration just to ride it for a few times a year or when they're on holidays. And the biggest issue that I think is really a big negative to registration is, will we get a reduction in people riding bikes? Now, a lot of places in the world want to encourage cycling for a number of reasons, because then it reduces your urban infrastructure. It also keeps people slimmer because they're exercising, and there is a major problem with sedentary behavior and obesity in Western countries. So they want to encourage people to ride bikes to work because it keeps you fit, it reduces the infrastructure, it reduces the congestion. There's a lot of benefits for governments to encourage people to use bicycles. But what this is going to do, because people have another cost added to their bicycle, and they're not keen guys like us who want to buy expensive bikes, they've just got cheaper bikes that they may buy from these type of Bunnings warehouses or Walmarts or Kmarts or those sorts of companies that sell the cheaper bikes. They just want to go for a cruise around the park or ride on a bicycle path or just ride up the shops or whatever every now and again. And if that's what they're doing, there will be a disincentive to buy that bike, because when they buy their $200 or $300 bike, they've got to pay this extra £50 on top of their bike. And that's going to discourage people from either keeping their bikes or purchasing a bike. Now, the last thing I want to touch on is the behaviour. Right now, there's this perception by drivers that if we put a plate on the bicycle and they can actually then report you, that it's going to change the behaviour of the cyclist, because now that their identification can be seen and can be taken and reported. But this doesn't really follow true, because if we just look at cars that have registration plates on them, we have bad drivers. We have people that speed. We have people that do U-turns in the wrong spots. We get people that do donuts. We get people that are hooning. We get all of these bad players driving cars, even though they've got number plates on their cars. So it doesn't stop bad behavior. The myth that, oh, because now we can identify you, you're going to behave, your behavior is going to change, really doesn't make sense. Because if someone likes to ride off the footpath onto the road, go a little bit of a way, the wrong way up the road, then cut across the road, and then go down a side street, I don't believe that it's going to change that person's behavior. They're still going to do that exact same shortcut for wherever they're going. And the number plate's not going to change their behavior. So we have two sides of the coin here. Is the number plate on the bicycle going to change the driver of the car's behavior? And I don't think so. Is the number plate on the bicycle going to change the behavior of the cyclist who's riding the bike? I don't think so. So, in conclusion, what is going to be the net benefit of putting a registration plate on a bicycle? Now, yeah, you can take the number and you can report them, but that's probably a very small percentage of people that will get caught, or people that are willing to take down the number plate and who are willing to report it. And then the police need to gather some evidence, and there have to be probably a visual camera or something. And probably very few cases will actually be prosecuted of people who have got number plates on their bicycles and are being bad actors and doing the wrong thing. So the net benefit for the roads and making people behave better by putting a registration plate on the bicycle is pretty minimal. And then the downside for the government is they have a huge administration cost, and that they have to employ more people. They've got to then take monies. They've got to keep track of all of these bike numbers. All of those sorts of things are really going to be a nightmare for the government, because they need to take on this huge administrative function for millions and millions and millions of bicycles, which may be just sitting in sheds. Probably some of the upsides for registration, if there will be any, is the fact that now with a vehicle, if the bicycle's stolen or there's any theft involved with the bicycles, we've probably got a better tracing method for the police to follow, because every bicycle will be registered, the serial number of that bicycle will be recorded, and that information to whoever the actual owner is of that bicycle would be a lot easier to identify. And people that steal bicycles, unless they can somehow get rid of the the serial number on the bicycle or the registration number, which may have to be indefinitely put on the bicycle, might be a plate stamped onto it. And if they haven't got that plate, well, then it's a bit of a question mark. It might be easier for the police to be able to go out and identify and find that item that's been stolen. So that's probably an upside for cyclists. Now, for me, whether I had a number plate on the back of my bicycle doesn't really bother me much. But I do not believe in any way that this is going to change the behaviour of drivers, and they're going to treat cyclists with a little bit more care, and it's not going to change the mentality of the cyclists that are bad actors, that do the wrong thing. It's not going to change their behaviour easily. So what is the benefit of putting a plate on a car? And that's why I think that a lot of people are arguing against this, not just cyclists, because in the whole scheme of things, the outcomes that the people who are asking for these registration plates to be put on bicycles is really not going to eventuate what they really think the outcomes are going to be, or what they believe the outcomes are going to be from that action. Anyway, guys, leave your comments down below. Are you for registration of bicycles? As I said, there is some upsides, especially when it's got to do with theft. And I know in London, especially in some of those places in New York, theft is a big problem. This may help curb that thing that's happening, because you have to lock everything up in those sorts of cities, and even then they just can cut through them. But if there's a tracing system, because there's a registration of bicycles out there, it might be easier for the police to find them. But overall, give us your comments on these things, like the goods and the bads. And what do you think about this? Would you be prepared to pay, $50 or £50 to register your bike and have a plate in the back of your car for you to be able to say you can use the roads as well? Or that belief, because we actually can legally use the roads, but that argument that drivers put up, then you can go back to them, well, I can be on the road, I can ride in the middle of the road because I pay my dues. Anyway, guys, that's where I'm going to leave it, and I will see you next vid. Cheers.